French people.
Your time had run out. I
Okay, there
started
we go.
over again. So, can you please tell us
How about
about
the moon? Okay, so like I think psychologists would question what he was saying. What had been hearing for since I was about 20 years old was suicide rates and/or admission. I think it's more like admissions to mental health facilities go up during the full moon. And I think I've heard studies that say, no, that's hogwash. And I'm going, well, like a person might be a little bit stronger if they're admitting themselves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
actually,
like one has to be careful about those kind of studies. Psychological studies are really, really well fraught, shall we say. So, here's what I'm going to say about astrology. I looked a little bit of it. The Mesopotamians looks as though they're the ones who started our so-called Western astrology. There's the Chinese astrology, and there'd be other things that would be like astrology and pretty well any other tradition, somewhere or another. So, from what I can tell with the Mesopotamian stuff, what they were doing was they were looking at aspects and stuff like that of various celestial bodies, and what they were making predictions about is not what you were going to be like or what your fate was going to be, but what the fate of a country or a region was going to be like. So that's different. Now here's the deal. Like the thing about the full moons and is that it would be by definition a what's called an opposition, which is considered a bad aspect in astrology. That's because you got the Earth in the middle, and you got the sun here, and you got the moon here. It has to be over here in order for it to be full. It's not exactly, the Earth isn't quite exactly in between. If it's exactly in between, then you've got an eclipse. Mm-hmm. But the Earth is so small by comparison with the moon. Well, not the moon, but the sun. Their paths are, they're not exactly circular. They're not exactly in the same plane and stuff like that. So most of the time, when it's full moon, it's not an eclipse. The Earth's not exactly in the way. So that's one bad aspect. The bad aspects are ones that are involve things that are kind of like square-like. So the other main bad aspect is, or one of the main ones, is 360 degrees or 0 degrees, which is the same thing. So you go 360 degrees, you're back at 0, and that's like when the moon is roughly in between the sun and the Earth. So that's called a conjunction. That's considered a bad aspect. And then you got the squares, which would be what we consider a half moon. That's the new moon, the conjunction. And then the half moons are the waning and the waxing. Half moons are the ones they're called squares. The good aspects are trines, which are based on a triangular kind of relationship of things, or sextiles, which are based on triangles halved and stuff like that. So is there something to it? Well, here's what I've known since about 1984. One has to be careful. But what I was reading suggested that solar flare activity inside the solar system, so that's flares coming off the sun, are at a maximum during, or at peaks during, bad aspects, so-called bad aspects.
Interesting.
So that would be opposition, conjunction, and I think the squares as well.
So what you're saying is that the moon and the Earth somehow influence the sun's solar flares. It would have to be that.
Yep.
That's incredible.
It's all a system, right? So, Gegenschein, that's German. Shine is spelled differently, it means shine. Gegen means, it's like against, but it means, in other words, it originally was something like the same word, or the roots of those words were basically the same word. Long time ago, when English was the same language as German, back on the European continent before the English came over and stole a bunch of land from the native Celts, or relatively native Celts. And so what the Gegenschein was, imagine it's, let's say, wintertime or midnight at the equator, like during the equinox. So the sun's would be, at midnight, would be right underneath you, exactly underneath you. If you looked right up above, you could see what was called a Gegenschein. Or could you? Because the scientists said, you can't see it because it doesn't exist. Fake science. It's not just new. It's been around forever. They were saying, it's imaginary. People are making it up. Then they sent stuff up into orbit, starting 1957. They go, the Earth has a tail. Only one. A comet has two tails. So a comet has one tail. It follows this elliptical pattern. It goes way out into, not exactly outer space, but outer reaches. Well, some of them have come from outer space. But some of them are, like way out beyond the orbit of Jupiter and stuff like that. And they come in ellipses. Some are parabolic. But that tail is made up of material. It's been kind of like, they figure it's burned off. I don't know exactly what it is, or burned off, or not melted, but evaporated off the comets, because the comets tend to be, or maybe sublimated off the comets, or just knocked off the comets, and it follows the path that it takes in. But the other tail points here. Here's the comet coming in, like here, to the sun, and it will have a tail that's out here of the material, but the sun's here. It'll have a second tail that will be 0.100, it's a Gegenschein, because it starts shining once it gets usually within the path, the orbit of Jupiter. It points 180 degrees away from the sun. So
the sun influences the tails of comets.
And our Earth's tail. Our Earth's tail travels, I think it's like millions of miles away from the sun. So right now with the sun there, it's, I don't know exactly what's happening. I sometimes think magnetism is the opposite of mass. In other words, it's a way of arranging stuff in space, in the way that mass is a way of arranging stuff in a compact area. But it's, you remember I've been telling you about...
That's really one to think on.
Oh, yeah, I was asking a plasma physicist. I'd run across this work by a guy called Alfvén, who won a Nobel Prize. He's not a flunky by any means. And Alfvén said he's the one who predicted, one of the ones, maybe the only, or the first. He said in 1937, 20 years before Sputnik was sent out there, when we send stuff out into outer space, we will find it is full. It's empty? No, it's full of magnetic fields. And he was right.
I really hurt myself today.
On your knee. At any rate. So, here's another thing Alfvén said. For a charged particle, empty space, or a vacuum, is as hard to move through as a regular body here on Earth is moving through syrup. Well, that's bizarre. That seems counterintuitive. So I was asking a plasma physicist, is that true? And he just said, yeah. Okay. Then I asked him, what causes that? What is slowing down that charged particle? He said, it's magnetic fields. That's what the medium is for light. Magnetic fields are all the way out there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what causes it, whether it's just like ripping ions off of each other, like protons off of electrons. I don't know what it is. It's maybe like stretching a rubber band out. Like you're just stretching stuff to fill space, and that yields a certain degree of tension. The same way that there's not much tension in a rubber band when it's just sitting around here. When you pull it, like if you haven't pulled it apart, it's just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
You go like this, and there's huge tension there. It's like on a guitar string. If you want to get more tension, you tighten it up, you pull it apart, right? Stuff like that. Now, I don't know what's happening. Got to get the philosophers involved, get them to say what they think it is, and then ignore that and take the opposite. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay, let's see how much time I have. Oh, I have lots of time. Okay.
So you're asking these questions like, what the hey is happening there with solar flares? I can't explain why. We're talking about it going this way, like affecting the Earth. But it obviously affects women more than men, right? I'm not saying it necessarily, like physically. But you see, that's kind of weird because we tend to think of it as the moon, but I think it's actually the sun. The moon's impact on the stuff coming from the sun. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Because what happens is, what we've got is, it's amazing. It looks a little bit like, they call it a bow shock in front of the Earth, like where the tail behind us is like a wake. This isn't exactly the way it is, but it's a wake behind a boat, because we're not actually traveling towards the sun. The stuff is coming towards us. It's like we as a boat are stationary, and the stuff is flowing by us. But again, we got to be careful. That's not exactly the way it is. But in front of us, it's a bow shock. And they say some of these bow shocks, like I think the bow shock between Jupiter's electromagnetic field, or magnetic field really, and the sun's solar wind is the hottest place in the solar system. No, that can't be. It's got to be hotter than the sun. So what they're looking at is just, I guess, how fast those particles are moving. The reason why it won't cook you is because there's so few particles there.
Yeah.
So, same way that if you put your hand in a stove that's cooking, you're not going to get burned if you just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because there's so few particles in there. They're hot and they're moving around
Sure.
in there. But if you put your hand on something metal, there's lots of particles in the metal, and you're going to be screaming. So it's kind of weird. There is some stuff happening there, and I don't know how the moon could affect it, because I don't think the moon has much of a magnetic field. There's something happening. I think that thing, it's not just, there's a gravitational thing, like with tides and stuff like that, but I think there's something else happening.
All right, so I'm gonna talk for a minute about what do you call it? What was that show called that we watched? What was it?
Which show? What was it about?
The comedy with the exclamation mark at the end. That was about police.
Oh, with that guy that was kind of like he's just would never be a policeman, because are there any Jewish policemen? And especially ones with fast lip like him. But it is funny, I gotta say.
Anyway, we watched a show. Oh, Sledgehammer. That's why. You see, I didn't write it down.
Oh, that was a different one that I was thinking of. That guy's definitely not Jewish, but yeah. Sledgehammer, yeah. That's weird.
Anyway,
it was Peter Gabriel.
I thought for sure I'd remember, and so I didn't write it down because I thought, well, why? I'm going to remember this if I do it with this. So anyway, Sledgehammer, exclamation mark, really funny. And I looked it up on Wiki, and Wiki says it's inspired by the Dirty Harry films, Eastwood. So
I think Airplane might still have been an influence. You know what I'm saying? They're making fun of the dirty. They are so wrong. They are so wrong on Wiki, and I will. Okay. No, I'm going to tell you why. Because what I said when I was talking about the show is, I said the humor reminds me of Airplane, Leslie Nielsen, and I looked up Airplane. It has an exclamation mark at the end, and I'm like, whoa. The release date for that was 1980. The first one.
And
because there were several.
Yeah. And,
several flights.
The show that we watched, Sledgehammer, you were right. It only aired 2 seasons. It ended in 1988. Okay. But the thing is Leslie Nielsen, if you remember, wasn't only an airplane. He was in a show called Naked Gun!
There we go.
Exclamation mark! And
When did that come up?
well, that came out 1988, December 2nd, but it was from the files of a TV series which only lasted 6 months, called Police Squad! Exclamation mark!
Yeah.
I am awesome.
Okay.
Wiki,
When-
not right. Me,
Mm-mm.
awesome.
You're both right.
Why?
You can take care of a lot of things when you do stuff artistically. So they were the first time I saw a Dirty Harry movie. I think it was a Dirty Harry movie.
Police Squad was 1982, by the way.
No. So the first time I saw one, it was a Clint Eastwood thing. It was the Go Ahead Make My Day thing.
Mm-hmm.
I went with a couple of kids. They were younger than me, and I'm going. They invited me to see it, and so they were just starting off university. I'm going, this isn't the kids that I'm used to going to university with, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were just eating it up, and I'm going, I can't stand this right-wing crap, you know.
Okay, but I'm going to say more about the Sledgehammer Show.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you think about it, 1982, when they did Police Squad, and that one starred Leslie Nielsen, he's funny. It should have worked out. Only 6 episodes. How come?
I think
But
I saw that.
That was not successful. 1982. And then, if you think about it, the Sledgehammer Show would have been 1986 to 88, and then it ends, and Naked Gun, the movie,
Takes over.
The it's
franchise.
released, and the budget was $65 million. Box office got $216.8 million. Very successful. And I was talking about earlier, and I don't know if the camera caught it because I had problems with the memory card clicked out. I didn't have enough memory, and then I did another take and was very frustrated because I wanted to conclude the whole thing, and then the battery kicked out. So
That was annoying.
very annoying. But
Technical difficulty.
what I'm going to talk about here is that I was talking about advertising and how you don't know if what was his name, Alan Spencer. I probably wrote it down. Oh dear, I didn't write it down because I thought I'd remember it. Alan Spencer. Anyway, you don't really know. You watch Sledgehammer, and you go, okay, well, this is from a, Democrat putting down Republican sort of perspective or whatever, right? Or maybe you want to look at it as yellow putting down red sort of perspective. However you want to view that. Wing it, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you don't know whether Alan Spencer, where he stands. He's producing a film or a TV series or whatever, and he wants to be successful. So he's trying to produce it for an audience, and he was successful. And you know what? Essentially, later on, David Zucker, Jim Abrams, Jerry Zucker, and Robert K. Wise were successful with Naked Gun. So, and that was probably, if you look at the timing of these things, one promoted the other very much.
Kind of like, I'm amazed this show didn't make it. I don't know what happened, but Naked Gun did make it. Maybe it's more of a movie type of vehicle, right?
Maybe
Police
that's,
Squad
yeah.
didn't make it. I don't know.
So anyway,
I found it hilarious.
Yeah.
But I see the Dirty Harry thing too.
You
the
do.
two aren't exclusive.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
All right, so maybe Wiki, whoever wrote that, isn't totally out to lunch, but I think I'm righter. So, but I like the Naked Gun movies, and I like Sledgehammer. So I'm not saying, if something's funny, it's funny. And both are funny as far as I'm concerned.